Warning: this story contains themes of abandonment, grief, and unexpected challenges. Viewer discretion is advised. Before we dive into this extraordinary tale, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and unexpected blessings. And leave a comment below telling us what you think of the story. Your engagement fuels our mission to bring more powerful narratives to light. The Unforeseen Guardian. The scent of polished mahogany and stale grief hung heavy in the opulent Mayfair mansion. Sarah clutched her swollen belly, her hands instinctively cradling the life within, as she stood in the grand entranceway, facing the man who held her precarious future in his hands. His sharp, unreadable gaze swept from her tired face to her obvious pregnancy. "I understand if my condition is a problem," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a tremor. "Your pregnancy doesn't concern me," James Blackwood replied, his tone as cold and precise as the perfectly tailored suit he wore. He adjusted his silk tie, his eyes devoid of warmth. "My only concern is whether you can properly care for my son." Sarah shifted uncomfortably under his intense scrutiny. The little boy in his arms, Ethan, a solemn toddler with wide, curious eyes, stared at her. It was the first glimmer of emotion she'd seen in this otherwise sterile, silent mansion. "Mr. Blackwood, I need this job," she admitted, straightening her shoulders, summoning a defiance she barely felt. "But I also understand children. Your son will be well cared for. I promise you that." The tension between them was palpable, a pregnant woman desperate for work facing a wealthy man who seemed carved from ice. This wasn't how Sarah had ever imagined her life at 28. Just hours earlier, Sarah Hayes had sat cross-legged on the threadbare carpet of her tiny London flat, surrounded by final notice bills. Rent was due in 5 days, and Liam, her ex-partner, had cleaned out their shared account before vanishing into thin air. 6 months pregnant and utterly abandoned, not exactly a selling point on job applications. "Just one break," she'd whispered, scrolling through listings on her cracked phone screen. When the ad appeared, live-in nanny required, excellent compensation, immediate start. It felt like the universe answering her desperate plea. Now, standing in the marble entryway of the Blackwood estate, Sarah wondered if she'd made a grave mistake. Everything about James Blackwood screamed unapproachable, from his perfectly coiffed hair to his tightly guarded eyes. "Mrs. Davies will show you around," he said, nodding towards an older woman hovering nearby, her expression a mixture of apprehension and weariness. "You'll spend today with Ethan. I'll make my decision this evening." He handed the quiet toddler to Sarah. The boy didn't protest, but didn't engage either, his eyes downcast, fixed on his small trainers. "Hello, Ethan," Sarah said softly, bending slightly, trying to meet his gaze. "My name is Sarah. Would you like to show me your toys?" The boy looked up, something flickering in his large, dark eyes. "This way," Mrs. Davies said briskly, her voice cutting off any further interaction. "The nursery is upstairs." As they climbed the sweeping staircase, the housekeeper offered a rare moment of unexpected kindness. "The boy hasn't been right since his mother passed. Doesn't talk much, barely eats. Mr. Blackwood tries. But when did she die?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice tinged with genuine sympathy. 18 months ago. Childbirth complications. Mr. Blackwood hasn't been the same either." The nursery was exquisitely appointed, like something from a luxury magazine, but it felt stark, unlived in, devoid of a child's playful touch. Sarah sat on the plush carpet, setting Ethan down gently. "What shall we play first?" she asked, her voice light, encouraging. The boy blinked, then pointed to a neglected-looking stuffed bear in the corner. By lunchtime, Ethan had spoken 3 words and almost smiled twice. Mrs. Davies watched with poorly disguised surprise as he ate most of his sandwich, a small but significant victory. From his imposing office window, James observed them in the manicured gardens, Sarah walking slowly with Ethan toddling beside her, pointing at birds, a rare curiosity lighting up his small face. Something crossed James's face, a flicker of pain, perhaps, or a longing he usually kept hidden. She's good with him, Mrs. Davies admitted cautiously when she brought his afternoon coffee. But she'll leave once her baby comes. Then we'll have peace until then, James replied flatly, returning his attention to his computer screen, his voice betraying nothing. That evening, Sarah sat across from James in his vast, leather-bound study, trying not to fidget under his cool, analytical assessment. "When are you due?" he asked unexpectedly, his gaze sharp. 3 months, Sarah replied, hands unconsciously resting on her belly. "But I can work until. Your references check out, though your nursing degree is incomplete." Sarah's cheeks burned, a rush of shame. "I had to pause my studies when—" "The guest house has 2 bedrooms, James interrupted, his voice cutting through her explanation. "It's yours if you want the position. Salary as discussed, plus full medical benefits. Mrs. Davies handles all household matters. You focus solely on Ethan." Sarah blinked, processing his words, the sheer unexpectedness of the offer. "You're offering me the job despite—" She gestured vaguely to her belly. "Ethan responded to you. That's all that matters." His tone softened marginally, a subtle shift she almost missed. "He needs stability, Miss Hayes. Can you provide that?" The question carried a weight far beyond simple employment terms. Could she promise stability when her own life was crumbling around her? "Yes," she said firmly, meeting his gaze, a quiet resolve hardening her voice. "I can." 2 days later, Sarah stood in the elegant guest house, surrounded by her meager possessions. The space was larger than her entire London flat, with windows overlooking meticulously manicured gardens. "Dinner is at 6 in the main house," Mrs. Davies informed her, her voice unusually subdued. "Mr. Blackwood occasionally joins when not working late." As the housekeeper left, Sarah caught sight of James standing on the main house terrace, Ethan in his arms. The boy was watching her intently, his small hand raised in what might have been a tentative wave. Sarah, surprised, waved back. To her astonishment, James nodded in acknowledgement, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. That night, she sat on her new, comfortable bed, her hands spread across her belly as her baby kicked playfully. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice a mix of hope and weariness. "This is temporary, but it's something." She couldn't know that across the sprawling estate, James Blackwood stood in his son's doorway, watching the boy sleep peacefully for the first time in months, wondering about the woman who had, in just one day, somehow reached him when no one else could. What do you think of James Blackwood's decision to hire Sarah, despite her pregnancy and incomplete qualifications? Was it a calculated risk or a sign of something more? Share your theories in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe if you're hooked on this journey of unexpected connections. Cracks in the wall. "He's smiling," James exclaimed, his voice tinged with genuine disbelief, as he watched Ethan giggle while Sarah pretended her spoon was a tiny airplane. "He does that now," Sarah replied simply, guiding the spoon into Ethan's eagerly opened mouth. 3 weeks had passed since she'd moved into the guest house, and the change in the toddler was remarkable. James hovered in the doorway of the kitchen, still dressed for the office despite the late hour. "I can't remember the last time I heard him laugh," James admitted, his gaze meeting Sarah's. "Children are resilient, Mr. Blackwood. They just need someone to show them it's safe to be happy again." The unspoken question hung between them. "And what about you, Mr. Blackwood?" James cleared his throat, an awkward cough. "I have calls to make. Good night, Miss Hayes." "Sarah," she corrected gently, a small, encouraging smile on her face. "If I'm going to be here until the baby comes, we should at least use first names." He hesitated, a moment of unusual vulnerability, then nodded. "James." As he disappeared down the hallway, Sarah sighed. In the 3 weeks she'd been at the Blackwood estate, she'd learned the rhythms of this strange, formal household. Mrs. Davies ran the practical matters with military precision. James worked constantly, a driven workaholic, appearing only for brief moments to check on Ethan, and Ethan, sweet, solemn Ethan, was slowly, miraculously coming alive again. "Your daddy loves you very much," she told the boy as she wiped his face. "He just doesn't know how to show it." Ethan patted her cheek with a sticky hand. "Sarah," he repeated, one of the few words he spoke regularly. Later that evening, Sarah was folding laundry in the guest house when Mrs. Davies knocked at the door, her face unusually grave. "He's asking for you," the housekeeper said without preamble. Another nightmare. Sarah hurried to the main house, finding Ethan red-faced and sobbing uncontrollably in his crib. James stood nearby, his usually immaculate hair disheveled, his expression utterly helpless. "I tried everything," he said, his voice strained, as Sarah gently lifted the boy. "He just keeps crying for you." "It's okay," Sarah murmured, rocking Ethan gently, a familiar comfort. "I'm here now." She settled into the rocking chair, beginning a soft English lullaby her grandmother had taught her. Gradually, Ethan's desperate sobs subsided, replaced by quiet sniffles. "How did you do that?" James whispered, watching in awe. "Consistency," Sarah answered, her voice soft but firm. "He knows I'll come when he calls." The implication landed heavily between them. James's jaw tightened, a shadow of pain crossing his features, but he said nothing. When Ethan was asleep again, Sarah placed him carefully back in his crib. As she straightened, she caught James studying a framed photo on the dresser. A beautiful woman with dark, flowing hair not unlike Sarah's own. "Eleanor," he said, his voice flat, noticing her gaze. "She would have been a wonderful mother." "I'm sure she was in the time she had," Sarah replied carefully, her heart aching for him. James shook his head, a ghost of a memory in his eyes. "She never even held him. There were complications immediately after birth." His voice was flat, controlled, devoid of emotion, yet filled with a raw pain. By the time they delivered Ethan, she was already gone. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her own swollen belly, a wave of empathy washing over her. "I'm so sorry. Get some rest, Sarah," he said, effectively ending the conversation, the invisible wall between them rising once more. "Thank you for coming." The next morning, Sarah found Mrs. Davies arranging fresh flowers in the kitchen. "He spoke to you about her," the housekeeper remarked, a rare hint of surprise in her voice. "That's something. Does he ever talk about Eleanor?" Mrs. Davies's hand stilled, a faraway look in her eyes. "Never. Not since the funeral. Threw himself into work. Hired nannies who never lasted. You're the fifth in 18 months. Why didn't they stay?" Sarah asked softly. "Some found him too cold. Others couldn't handle a child who wouldn't speak. The last one left when Ethan wouldn't stop crying for 3 days straight." Sarah thought about James, about the profound grief etched in the lines around his eyes, a silent testament to his loss. "He's drowning, isn't he?" Mrs. Davies simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the truth. Days turned into weeks. Sarah established gentle, comforting routines for Ethan, carefully documenting his progress, his small victories. James began arriving home earlier, lingering during dinner, asking questions about Ethan's day. Small steps, but noticeable ones. Then came the day that changed everything. Sarah was in the sprawling garden with Ethan when a familiar, unwelcome voice called her name. She turned, her blood running cold at the sight of Liam, leaning against a ridiculously expensive sports car at the edge of the driveway. "Sarah, baby?" he called, sauntering toward them, a predatory smile on his lips. "We need to talk." She clutched Ethan closer, instinctively shielding him. "There's nothing to discuss. You made your choice." Liam's smile didn't reach his eyes, which glinted with a cruel calculation. "Don't be like that. I heard you landed a sweet gig. Figured we could work something out. Leave, Liam. Now." Her voice was sharp, laced with a fear she hadn't felt in months. "Our baby deserves support from its father," he said, reaching for her arm, his fingers closing around her forearm. "Unless you've been telling your rich boss that it's his problem now. Remove your hand from her immediately." James's voice cut through the garden like a blast of Arctic air. He stood on the terrace, his expression thunderous, a barely contained rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. "This is private," Liam snapped, his eyes narrowing. "Between me and my woman." "Your woman." James descended the steps slowly, deliberately, his presence radiating menace. "The woman you abandoned when she was 4 months pregnant? The woman whose savings you emptied before disappearing?" Liam's grip loosened in shock, his face paling. "How did you?" "I make it my business to know who lives on my property," James said evenly, his voice dangerously low. "Especially around my son." Sarah stared at James, stunned by his knowledge and his fierce, unexpected intervention. "This is none of your business, man," Liam snarled, trying to regain his composure. "Miss Hayes and her child are under my protection," James replied coolly, taking another slow, measured step closer. "That makes it very much my business. Now, you have exactly 30 seconds to leave my property before I call security." Liam looked between them, a cold calculation crossing his face. "Fine, but this isn't over, Sarah." He turned abruptly and strode back to his car, tires spraying gravel as he sped away. "You had me investigated?" Sarah asked once Liam was gone, a mix of hurt and overwhelming gratitude swirling within her. "Basic background check," James admitted, his gaze steady. "Standard for all employees." "And you knew about Liam?" "I knew enough." James's expression softened marginally, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" Sarah nodded, still processing the raw intensity of what had just happened. James had defended her, protected her, with an intensity that seemed utterly at odds with his usual detachment. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Sarah found James in his study, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. "Thank you," she said from the doorway, "for earlier." He looked up from his laptop, his expression returning to its usual guardedness. "He won't bother you here again. I've instructed security." "How much do you know about Liam?" James closed his laptop, his fingers steepled before him. 3 prior arrests for fraud. Multiple complaints from former girlfriends about financial manipulation. "He's tried this before, Sarah." "I was such a fool," she whispered, the shame a bitter taste in her mouth. "No," James said with unexpected gentleness, his voice surprisingly soft. "Just someone who trusted the wrong person." Their eyes met across the room, a profound moment of understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared vulnerabilities. "Good night, James," Sarah said finally, the words a gentle breaking of the spell. "Good night, Sarah." As she walked back to the guest house under the vast, star-scattered sky, Sarah felt something undeniably shift between them. The first genuine crack in the formidable wall James had built around himself. Were you surprised by James's intervention? What does this moment reveal about his true feelings for Sarah? Share your insights in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more surprising twists and turns. A glimmer of hope. "Read it again," Ethan demanded, bouncing on Sarah's lap, his small finger pointing emphatically at the colorful storybook. "That's the 3rd time, little man?" Sarah laughed, adjusting her position to accommodate her growing belly. At 7 months pregnant, simple tasks were becoming challenging, her movements slower, more deliberate. "Please, Sarah," Ethan begged, his eyes wide with the innocent manipulation only toddlers could master. "Once more, then bedtime," she agreed, unable to resist his newfound enthusiasm. From the doorway, James watched silently, a soft, almost tender expression replacing his usual stoic mask. These quiet moments, when neither Sarah nor Ethan realized he was observing, revealed a profound truth he was slowly, reluctantly accepting. His son was thriving under Sarah's care in ways James hadn't thought possible. A sudden crash of thunder outside made them all jump. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the nursery into complete darkness. "Daddy!" Ethan cried out in fear, his small voice trembling. James stepped forward instantly, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm here, son. Lightning briefly illuminated the room, showing Sarah comforting the frightened boy, holding him close. "Let's find some candles," she suggested calmly, her voice a soothing balm. "It'll be an adventure." 20 minutes later, the kitchen island glowed with the warm, flickering light of candles. Ethan sat wide-eyed, his earlier fear forgotten in the magic of the moment, as Sarah fashioned intricate shadow puppets on the wall. "A rabbit!" he exclaimed, pointing excitedly at the dancing shadow of Sarah's hands. "Your turn," Sarah said, turning to James, who hesitated by the counter, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "I don't know how," he admitted, a rare confession of vulnerability. "Then we'll teach you," Sarah replied, gesturing him closer with an inviting smile. Awkwardly, James joined them, allowing Sarah to position his large hands, guiding his fingers. "Like this," she murmured, her fingers warm against his. "Now you've made a dog." Ethan's delighted laugh echoed in the candlelit kitchen, a sound so pure, so full of joy, it caught James completely off guard. When was the last time he'd truly played with his son like this? "Eleanor used to make shadow puppets," he said suddenly, the words surprising even himself, a memory surfacing from the depths of his grief. "When we were dating, there was a power outage in her apartment. She made an entire shadow puppet show to pass the time." Sarah's expression remained gentle, encouraging, a silent invitation to share more. This was the first time James had voluntarily mentioned Eleanor since her death. "What was she like?" Sarah asked softly. James looked at Ethan, who was now attempting his own shadow puppets with determined concentration, utterly engrossed. "Vibrant, always laughing. She could light up any room." He paused, a distant look in his eyes. "She would have loved seeing him like this. You could tell him stories about her," Sarah suggested gently, a profound wisdom in her words. "Children need to know where they come from." Later, when the power returned and Ethan was tucked soundly into bed, James lingered in the hallway, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice a low rumble. Sarah understood he meant more than just handling the power outage. "He's a wonderful boy, James. He deserves to know both his parents, the one who's here, and the one who watches over him." Something profound shifted in James's expression, a quiet acceptance. "You're good with him. He hasn't been this happy since, well, ever. He just needed someone present," Sarah replied carefully, her eyes meeting his. "You should try it sometime." Instead of withdrawing at her gentle challenge, as he usually would, James nodded, a genuine openness in his gaze. "Perhaps I should." The following weeks brought subtle but profound changes. James began coming home earlier, joining them for dinner 3, then 4, then 5 nights a week. He started actively participating in Ethan's bedtime routines, reading stories while Sarah, increasingly tired from her advanced pregnancy, rested nearby. One afternoon, Sarah found James in his home office, engrossed in a video conference with international partners. Ethan had scraped his knee in the garden, a minor injury, and despite Mrs. Davies's attempts to intervene, was calling insistently for his father. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, hesitating at the office door. "He's insisting." To her surprise, James immediately excused himself from the call, his professional composure momentarily abandoned. "Gentlemen, family emergency. We'll reconvene tomorrow." He lifted Ethan, examining the minor injury with exaggerated seriousness, a hint of playfulness in his voice. "This calls for a special bandage, don't you think?" Sarah watched them head to the bathroom together, Ethan's tears already subsiding in his father's arms. Mrs. Davies appeared beside her, her eyebrows raised in disbelief. "Never thought I'd see the day," the housekeeper murmured, a rare smile gracing her lips. "That man hasn't missed a meeting in 18 months. People can change," Sarah replied, a quiet conviction in her voice. "Some people," Mrs. Davies agreed, giving Sarah an approving nod. As Sarah's pregnancy advanced, James unexpectedly insisted on driving her to her medical appointments, waiting patiently in the reception areas, asking appropriate, concerned questions about her health. When she mentioned her small baby shower had been cancelled due to her friend's sudden illness, he surprised her by having Mrs. Davies arrange a modest, intimate celebration at the estate. "You didn't have to do this," Sarah said, genuinely touched by the gesture, her eyes softening. "You're carrying a child alone," James replied, his voice gentle. No one should face that without support. The unspoken truth, that his own child had been welcomed into the world without his wife, hung between them, a shared understanding of profound loss. Their peaceful, evolving routine was shattered 3 days later by the unexpected, grand arrival of Eleanor's parents, Lord and Lady Kingston. The formidable couple swept into the house like royalty, Lady Kingston's critical gaze taking in every detail of the opulent surroundings, while her husband, Lord Kingston, made polite but aloof small talk with James. "And who is this?" Lady Kingston asked coolly, her eyes narrowing slightly as Sarah entered with Ethan, her pregnant belly now quite prominent. "Sarah Hayes, Ethan's nanny," James introduced her, his tone suddenly formal again, a subtle shift that did not go unnoticed by Sarah. Lady Kingston's eyes narrowed further at Sarah's pregnancy. "I see." Throughout dinner, the older woman made pointed, condescending comments about appropriate household staff and maintaining standards. When Sarah excused herself to put Ethan to bed, she overheard the conversation in the dining room turn heated. "Eleanor's barely cold in her grave and you've replaced her with the help?" Lady Kingston's voice was an icy whisper, laced with barely concealed disgust. "A pregnant one at that. Have you no shame, James?" "That's enough," James replied sharply, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Sarah is an excellent nanny, and Ethan adores her. My daughter's memory isn't threatened by someone caring for her son." Sarah hurried upstairs, her heart pounding, a mix of hurt and confusion swirling within her. She hadn't expected to feel so deeply wounded by the implication, or so strangely comforted by James's fierce defense. After the Kingstons departed the next morning, James retreated into his work again, canceling dinner plans and returning to his late hours. The easy companionship they developed, the fragile bridge of trust, seemed suddenly fragile, broken by unspoken complications. Ethan, sensitive to the shift in atmosphere, began having nightmares again. Sarah found herself utterly exhausted, managing the toddler's renewed anxiety while her own pregnancy became increasingly uncomfortable. One afternoon, while Ethan napped, Sarah was organizing a guest closet in the main house when she discovered a beautiful leather-bound album. Opening it, she was met with radiant wedding photos. James looking younger, happier, beside a stunning bride. Eleanor was breathtaking, dark-haired, with warm, sparkling eyes and a smile that indeed lit up every frame. But as Sarah turned the pages, a cold, sickening realization washed over her. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same hair coloring, similar delicate features, even comparable builds before pregnancy had changed Sarah's body. "What are you doing?" James's voice, sharp and accusatory, cut through her thoughts. Sarah looked up, the album still open in her trembling hands. "I was organizing and found this." She hesitated. Then, her voice a desperate whisper, asked, "James, did you hire me because I look like her?" His expression hardened instantly, his face becoming a mask of stone. "You're overstepping, Miss Hayes." The formal address stung more than his harsh tone. "Is that why Ethan responded to me?" she pressed, tears pricking her eyes. "Because I remind him of the mother he never knew? That's absurd." James snapped, striding forward and snatching the album from her hands, his movements jerky, agitated. "You were qualified and available. Nothing more." But the damage was done. The question hung between them, poisoning the fragile trust they'd built. That night, Sarah began packing some of her meager belongings, silent tears streaming down her face. Despite her growing attachment to Ethan and her complicated, undeniable feelings for James, she couldn't stay somewhere she was just a replacement, a convenient echo of a woman she could never truly be. "Where are you going?" James demanded, his voice tight, controlled, but his eyes betraying something closer to raw panic. as he found Sarah filling a suitcase in the guest house. "I think it's better if I leave," Sarah replied quietly, folding a maternity sweater with trembling hands. "Mrs. Jones from the agency can take over until you find someone permanent." "Because of a photo album?" James stepped closer, his voice incredulous. "That's ridiculous." Sarah placed both hands on her lower back, stretching to ease the constant, weary ache. "Is it? You hired me because I look like Eleanor. You let me into your home, into Ethan's life, because I'm some kind of surrogate for his mother." "That's not," James began, then stopped abruptly, his words dying in his throat. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. "You can't even deny it," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with profound hurt. James ran a hand through his dark hair, his carefully constructed composure finally cracking. "It wasn't conscious," he admitted, his voice rough, pained. "When the agency sent your photo, something felt right. I didn't realize until later." The honesty, brutal in its frankness, hurt more than any lie would have. Sarah sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted, the weight of her pregnancy and her emotions pressing down on her. "Ethan deserves better than a replacement mother, and I deserve better than being someone's ghost." "You're not a replacement," James insisted, his voice firm, urgent. "Whatever brought you here, what you've become to Ethan, to this household, is entirely your own. Your magic." Sarah shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. "I need to think, James. Please, just give me some space." James stood stiffly by the door, his shoulders slumped. "Will you at least wait until morning? It's late, and in your condition." "Fine," Sarah conceded, her voice barely audible. "Tomorrow." After he left, Sarah curled onto her side, one hand resting on her belly where her daughter kicked restlessly. How had she let herself become so attached? To Ethan, with his solemn eyes and newfound laughter. To this place, with its quiet gardens and sun-filled nursery. To James, with his grief-hardened heart that was only now showing the first tentative signs of thawing. Sleep came fitfully, disturbed by uncomfortable contractions that Sarah, a nursing student, dismissed as Braxton Hicks. But at 3:17 a.m., she woke to a searing, unfamiliar pain and an alarming dampness between her legs. "No!" she gasped, fumbling for the bedside lamp. "Not yet. Not here." But her body had other plans. Another contraction gripped her, stronger, more relentless than before. Sarah reached frantically for her phone, panic rising when she couldn't find it. Struggling to her feet, she managed to pull on a robe before another wave of excruciating pain doubled her over. She had to reach the main house, call an ambulance. 7 weeks early was dangerous. The baby was too small, her tiny lungs possibly underdeveloped. The path to the main house, usually a short stroll, had never seemed so impossibly long. Sarah made it halfway before another contraction brought her to her knees, a guttural cry escaping her lips. She crawled the remaining distance to the back door, using the last of her strength to bang weakly against the glass. "Help!" she called, her voice thin, desperate. "Please, someone." Minutes passed like hours before light suddenly flooded the kitchen. James appeared in pajama bottoms and a rumpled t-shirt, his sleep-fogged confusion turning to stark alarm when he saw her collapsed against the door, her face ashen. "Sarah!" He yanked the door open, kneeling beside her, his hands hovering, unsure how to help. "What's happening?" "The baby!" she gasped, clutching her belly, her breath ragged. "Coming. Too early." James gathered her into his arms with surprising strength, carrying her inside. "Mrs. Davies!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the silent house, laying Sarah gently on the drawing room sofa. "Call an ambulance." The housekeeper appeared instantly, her face pale with sleep and concern. "Right away, Mr. Blackwood." Sarah clutched James's hand as another contraction ripped through her, agony coiling in her lower back. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her voice strained. "It shouldn't hurt like this." "The ambulance is 8 minutes out," Mrs. Davies reported, returning with an armful of clean towels and blankets. James hadn't released Sarah's hand. "I'm driving her," he announced, his voice firm, resolute. "It'll be faster." He turned to Sarah, his expression fierce with determination. "Can you make it to the car?" She nodded weakly, allowing him to lift her again. Mrs. Davies promised to stay with the still sleeping Ethan. The drive was a blur of searing pain and overwhelming fear. James broke every speed limit, one hand on the wheel, the other still gripping Sarah's, a lifeline. "Stay with me," he kept repeating, his voice a steady chant. "We're almost there. Don't leave me, Sarah. Don't leave me," Sarah begged, as they rushed her into the blinding lights of the emergency room, the fear of abandonment momentarily eclipsing the pain. "Never," James promised, holding her gaze, his eyes intense, unyielding. Everything accelerated after that. Medical terms flew around her: placental abruption, fetal distress, emergency C-section. A doctor pulled James aside, their grave conversation just out of earshot. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, when James returned to her side, his face ashen, drawn. "They need to deliver immediately," he said, his voice steady despite his pallor. "There are complications." "Tell me," Sarah insisted, reading something terrible, something unspeakable, in his haunted expression. James swallowed hard, his throat working. "The doctor says if things worsen, they might have to choose between you or the baby." Cold, terrifying fear washed over her, an icy wave. "Save her," Sarah whispered immediately, without a second thought. "Promise me, James." "I'm not promising anything except that you're both going to be fine," he replied fiercely, his eyes blazing with a desperate resolve. "I've called for specialists from the Royal London Hospital, the best in the country. They're on their way." A nurse approached, her face grim. "We need to prep her now." "Can he stay?" Sarah asked desperately, her grip tightening on James's hand. The nurse hesitated, glancing between them. "Are you the father?" Before James could answer, Sarah gripped his hand harder, her eyes pleading. "He's my family. Please." Perhaps it was the raw desperation in her voice, or something in James's fierce, protective expression. But the nurse nodded, a flicker of compassion in her eyes. "Scrub in quickly, then." In the operating room, bright, blinding lights and urgent voices surrounded Sarah. James appeared beside her head, properly gowned and masked, his eyes above the surgical mask, intense with raw emotion. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling, as they prepared the anesthesia. "I know," James replied softly, his voice a comforting whisper against her ear. "But you're the strongest person I've ever met, Sarah Hayes, and I'll be right here, right beside you." As darkness claimed her, a profound sense of peace settling over her, Sarah felt his lips pressed gently against her forehead. A silent benediction, a sacred promise. She woke to the sterile smell of the hospital and the soft, rhythmic beeping of monitors. For one terrifying moment, she couldn't remember why she was there. A gaping void in her memory. "The baby!" she croaked, trying to sit up, a surge of frantic panic. "She's okay." James's voice, raspy with exhaustion, came from beside her. He looked utterly drained, unshaven, his clothes rumpled from hours of agonizing waiting. £4, 3 ounces. "They have her in the NICU, but she's breathing on her own." Relief flooded Sarah, so overwhelming it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Really?" James nodded, taking her hand carefully, avoiding the 4 lines. "She's tiny, but fierce, like her mother." "Did you see her?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes." Something in James's expression shifted, softened, a profound tenderness replacing the exhaustion. "She's beautiful, Sarah. Truly beautiful. I want to see her too." "Soon," James promised gently. "The doctor wants to check you first. You lost a lot of blood." Sarah's mind cleared enough to register that James looked more than tired. He looked like he'd been through hell and back. "How long have I been here?" 22 hours, he replied, his voice heavy. "The surgery was complicated. Memory filtered back. The doctor's grave face. The terrible choice that might have been necessary. Did they have to? No, James interrupted quickly, sensing her unspoken question. But it was close. Too close. His voice broke on the last word, his carefully composed facade crumbling, revealing the raw fear he had kept hidden. You stayed, Sarah murmured in wonder, the simple fact of his presence a balm to her soul. I promised I wouldn't leave. He met her eyes directly, his gaze intense, vulnerable. I'm not very good at letting people in, Sarah. After Eleanor died, I shut everything down. It was easier than feeling the pain. He paused, searching for the right words. Then you came with your quiet strength and your way with Ethan. And suddenly, my house wasn't just a place filled with ghosts anymore. It felt like home again. Sarah listened, scarcely breathing, completely captivated by his unexpected vulnerability. When the doctor told me they might have to choose, James continued, his voice rough with emotion, I realized something. The thought of losing you terrified me more than I could bear. Not just for Ethan's sake, but for mine. For my sake, Sarah. A nurse entered before Sarah could respond, checking her vitals with cheerful efficiency. Your little girl is doing very well, she informed them, a bright smile on her face. We can bring her down soon for a quick visit. After the nurse left, James cleared his throat, a faint blush rising to his neck. The baby needs a name for the records. Luna, Sarah said without hesitation, the name flowing effortlessly from her lips. It means moon in Latin, a light in the darkness. James smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face, melting years of sadness from his features. Luna Hayes, it's perfect. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice filled with a profound gratitude. For everything you did. Don't thank me yet, James replied, his expression turning serious again, his gaze searching hers. I have something to ask you. Both of you. He took a deep breath, the words coming out in a rush. Stay. Not as employees, but as family. I'll help you raise Luna if you'll let me. Sarah stared at him, speechless, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and disbelief. I know it's sudden, he continued quickly, misinterpreting her silence. And complicated. But when I saw you holding Luna in recovery, something just clicked into place. She needs a father. Ethan needs a mother. And I? What do you need, James? Sarah whispered, prompting him gently. You, he answered simply, his voice raw with emotion. Both of you. Before Sarah could formulate a response, a nurse wheeled in a small incubator, bringing it gently to her bedside. Inside lay a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. Here's your mommy, the nurse cooed, carefully transferring the fragile infant into Sarah's waiting arms. Luna was impossibly small, a miracle in her arms. Her face scrunched in concentration, perfect miniature fingers curled tight. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she counted tiny toes, stroked the silky head, and whispered promises in soft English. When she looked up, James was watching them with such profound tenderness it took her breath away. She's perfect, he said, his voice thick with emotion, gently touching Luna's minuscule cheek with one finger. The baby reflexively turned toward his touch, her tiny mouth searching. Would you like to hold her? Sarah offered, her heart swelling with an unexpected connection. James hesitated, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes, then nodded. With great care, Sarah transferred Luna into his arms. The sight of this powerful, reserved man cradling her tiny daughter with such reverence, such delicate tenderness, broke something open inside her. I'd like to stay, Sarah said finally, her voice clear, resolute. For Ethan. For Luna. She paused, her eyes meeting his, a new, daring hope blossoming in her chest. For us. James looked up from the baby, hope dawning, tentative but bright, in his eyes. Us. Whatever that means, Sarah clarified, a soft smile touching her lips. One day at a time. One day at a time, he agreed, the promise settling between them as gently as the tiny baby in his arms. What do you think of James's unexpected proposal? Was it too soon, or the perfect moment? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're cheering for Sarah and James, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories. Home, a new beginning. Welcome home, Sarah, James said, holding the front door open, a soft smile on his face, as Sarah carefully navigated the steps with Luna bundled in her arms. After a week in the sterile hospital, the crisp, fresh sunlight felt strange on Sarah's face. The familiar grounds of the Blackwood estate somehow felt different now. Perhaps because she was returning not to the guest house, but to the main residence. Not as an employee, but as something new and wonderfully undefined. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, scanning the grand entryway. "Napping with Mrs. Davies watching over him," James replied. "I wanted to get you both settled first." He led Sarah upstairs, past Ethan's room, to a door she'd never seen opened. Inside was a stunning nursery, freshly painted in soft yellows and calming grays, with a pristine white crib, a functional changing table, and a comfortable rocking chair. "When did you do this?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. "Mrs. Davies supervised while we were at the hospital," James explained, a hint of shyness in his voice. He looked uncertain. "Is it all right?" The designer said yellow was gender neutral, but still cheerful. Sarah touched the delicate mobile hanging over the crib, tiny moons and stars that caught the afternoon light, casting dancing shadows. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Your room is through here," James continued, opening a connecting door to a spacious, light-filled bedroom. "I thought you'd want to be close to Luna." Sarah noted that James had quietly arranged for her belongings to be moved from the guest house, her few possessions looking somewhat lost in the larger, opulent space. "We can redecorate," James offered, misreading her silence, assuming her hesitation was about the decor. "Make it more your style." "No, it's lovely," Sarah assured him, her voice soft. "It's just a big change." James nodded, understanding that her meaning went far beyond mere decor. "One day at a time, remember?" The first weeks of their new arrangement were a beautiful blur of middle-of-the-night feedings, regular pediatrician visits, and Ethan's curious, joyful explorations of his new baby sister. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah found unexpected joy in watching James learn to care for a newborn. "Support her head," Sarah instructed patiently as James attempted his first diaper change, his confident businessman's demeanor replaced by endearing uncertainty. "That's it. Now the wipes. She's so small," he marveled, handling Luna as if she were made of delicate glass, his awe palpable. "You didn't do this with Ethan, did you?" A shadow crossed James's face, a hint of regret. "I was not in a good place after Eleanor died. The night nurse handled most of it." Sarah touched his arm gently, a comforting gesture. "You're doing it now. That's what matters." One morning, Sarah found James in the kitchen at 5 a.m., dark circles under his eyes, feeding Luna a bottle while expertly reviewing documents one-handed. "You should have woken me," Sarah said softly, taking Luna from him. "You needed rest," James replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "Besides, we had a good chat about quarterly projections. Didn't we, little one?" Sarah smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "You've restructured your meetings." "I move things around," James admitted, a rare, relaxed smile on his face. "Most days I can work from home until 10, then again after 3. The middle hours I need to be at the office, but that's when both kids usually nap anyway." "Kids?" Sarah repeated softly, her heart swelling. "You consider Luna yours too?" James met her gaze steadily, his eyes full of earnest emotion. "If that's okay with you." Something warm and tender unfurled in Sarah's chest. "More than okay, James. Much more." Ethan adjusted to the new family structure with surprising ease, delighting in his role as big brother. "My baby," he would proudly announce to visitors, pointing at Luna's bassinet. Sarah observed that James now spoke of Eleanor more freely, especially to Ethan. Your mama loved butterflies, he told the boy one afternoon, showing him photos of Eleanor in the garden, a gentle sadness in his voice. She would have loved teaching you their names. Gradually, Sarah began reclaiming parts of herself beyond motherhood. With James's unwavering encouragement, she enrolled in online nursing classes to complete her degree. I can watch both children on Tuesday evenings, he insisted. You need dedicated study time. Are you sure? Sarah asked, concerned. Luna still wakes up every couple of hours. Sarah, James said seriously, his hand gently covering hers. You've put your dreams on hold long enough. 3 months after Luna's birth, as Sarah was reviewing anatomy notes in the quiet study, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. I'm outside your fancy gate. Carla. Sarah's heart sank. Her mother had never approved of her relationship with Liam, had openly predicted its failure. Their last conversation had ended with Carla's cold, cutting assessment. You make the same mistakes over and over, Sarah. James found Sarah staring at her phone, her face pale, a flicker of dread in her eyes. What's wrong? My mother's here, Sarah explained, her voice tight. She hasn't even met Luna yet. Our relationship is complicated. Do you want me to send her away? James offered, his hand instinctively going to her arm in a protective gesture. Sarah shook her head. No, this confrontation is long overdue. Carla Hayes swept into the house with critical eyes, taking in the immense wealth around her with transparent judgment. She hugged Sarah stiffly, a brief, formal embrace, then peered at Luna in her arms, her expression disdainful. At least she has your coloring, Carla observed, her voice sharp. Mother, Sarah warned, her voice low. Carla's attention shifted to James, who stood protectively nearby, his expression unreadable. So this is your new arrangement? James Blackwood. He introduced himself formally, extending a hand that Carla reluctantly, briefly shook. Would you like some tea, Mrs. Hayes? While Mrs. Davies served tea in the sun-drenched garden, Carla launched her interrogation. How exactly did you go from employee to moving into the master bedroom so quickly? Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and indignation. I'm not in the master bedroom, Mother. I have my own room connected to Luna's nursery. How traditional, Carla said sarcastically, her lips curling. First Liam, now a rich man. You always need someone to save you. That's unfair, Sarah protested, her voice rising. Is it? Carla shot back, her eyes hard. Your entire life, you've latched on to others rather than standing on your own 2 feet. James, who had been quietly observing the exchange, listening intently, set down his cup with deliberate care. Mrs. Hayes, with all due respect, you have it backwards. His voice was calm, yet resonated with an undeniable authority. Sarah saved us, my son and me, when we were drowning in grief. She brought life back into a house that had become a mausoleum. Carla blinked, clearly surprised by his intervention, her sharp expression momentarily faltering. Furthermore, James continued, his gaze unwavering, she's completing her nursing degree while being an exceptional mother to 2 children. If that's not standing on her own, I don't know what is. Sarah stared at James, deeply moved by his fierce, unexpected defense. Carla narrowed her eyes, a flicker of resentment in their depths. And what do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Blackwood? Mother, Sarah exclaimed, horrified. A second chance, James answered simply, his voice soft, profound. For my son, for myself, for all of us. After Carla departed, her farewell slightly warmer, less caustic than her greeting, Sarah found James in his office. Thank you for what you said, she told him, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. No one's ever defended me like that before. James looked up from his computer, a thoughtful expression on his face. I only spoke the truth, he hesitated, then continued. Your mother thinks you're making another mistake. My mother thinks independence means not needing anyone, Sarah replied, a small, wry smile touching her lips. I disagree. And what do you think it means? James asked, his gaze fixed on hers, inviting a deeper conversation. Sarah considered the question, then looked at him directly. Choosing connections from strength, not desperation. James stood, slowly moving around the desk until he was standing directly before her. "Is that what we're doing?" he asked softly, his voice low. "Choosing a connection? Aren't we?" Sarah asked, her voice a whisper, the air between them thick with unspoken feelings. The moment stretched between them, charged with a profound, unspoken emotion. James reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face with exquisite gentleness. "Sarah," he began, his voice barely audible, just as Ethan's cheerful voice called from the doorway. "Mama Sarah." Luna crying. They both turned to see Ethan standing there, a sleepy frown on his small face. His adoption of Mama Sarah was so natural, so filled with genuine affection. It brought tears to her eyes. The intimate moment between them paused, not broken, but simply deferred. "Coming, sweetheart," Sarah replied to Ethan, giving James a smile that promised later. That evening, after both children were asleep, Sarah and James walked in the quiet garden. Moonlight silvered the winding paths, and somewhere, a small fountain bubbled peacefully, its gentle splash the only sound. "Ethan called me Mama today," Sarah said quietly, sharing the profound moment. "Does that bother you?" James shook his head, his gaze thoughtful, directed at the moon. "No, but I wonder if it should, if I'm somehow replacing Eleanor." "You're not replacing anyone," James said firmly, his voice resolute, drawing her closer. "You're creating something new. We both are." They stopped beside a fragrant rose trellis, the night air sweet with the scent of blossoms. "I've been afraid," James admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, a rare confession of vulnerability. "Afraid of feeling anything again. After Eleanor died, I convinced myself that loving someone meant inevitably losing them. It was easier to shut down. And now?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding, daring to hope. "Now I'm more afraid of not loving at all," James confessed, turning to face her fully, his eyes searching hers, intense with emotion. "Of missing what's right in front of me because I'm too scared to reach for it." Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle question rather than a demand. Sarah answered by stepping closer, her hands finding his shoulders as the kiss deepened. A tender exploration, a silent promise. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Sarah felt as though something had shifted irreversibly between them. A profound, beautiful change. "I should check on Luna," she whispered, reluctant to break the magical moment. James nodded, touching her cheek once more, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "We have time." Later that night, Sarah found a small, leather-bound journal on her bedside table. Opening it, she recognized Eleanor's elegant handwriting from the wedding album photos. A small note from James was paper-clipped to the cover. "She would have wanted Ethan to know her through her own words someday. I think she would have wanted you to know her too." Sarah sat up, reading until dawn, learning about the woman whose absence had shaped this household. Her hopes, her fears, her complicated relationship with her controlling parents, and her deep love for James despite their occasional struggles. What Sarah couldn't know was that across the hall, James was discovering Eleanor's final, secret journal entries, hidden in his office safe all these months. Entries that would soon threaten the fragile happiness they were building together. Do you think Sarah and James are ready to face new challenges together? What do you predict will happen next with Eleanor's hidden journal? Share your theories in the comments. If you're invested in their journey, smash that like button and subscribe for the continuation of their story, The Legacy of Truth. "You've been served," the courier announced dispassionately, handing James a thick, official-looking envelope before disappearing down the long gravel driveway. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as James stood frozen on the front steps, staring at the document in his hands, his face draining of all color. When he finally entered the house, his usual composure was shattered. "James, what is it?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern. Without speaking, he handed her the papers. Sarah skimmed the legal terminology, her stomach dropping, a cold dread washing over her as understanding dawned. The Kingstons are suing for custody of Ethan, she whispered in disbelief. On what grounds? Moral unfitness, James quoted bitterly, pacing the kitchen, his voice tight with controlled fury. They claim I'm dishonoring Eleanor's memory by replacing her with a gold-digging immigrant and creating an unstable environment for Ethan. Sarah flinched at the cruel characterization, a sharp stab of pain in her chest. They can't possibly win. They have money, connections, and they've been planning this, James replied, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. The filing mentions our living arrangement, your pregnancy timeline, even Liam's visit. They've had us watched. Sarah sank into a chair, instinctively reaching for Luna, who slept peacefully in her bouncer, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. This is my fault. No, James said firmly, his voice cutting through her self-blame. This has nothing to do with you. Eleanor's parents never approved of me. They tolerated our marriage because of their daughter's happiness. But they've always believed Ethan belongs with them, with their legacy. What do we do? Sarah asked, her voice small. I've called my attorney. James checked his watch, his movements jerky. He'll be here in an hour. The meeting with Arthur Winters, a sharp-eyed man with an intimidating reputation in London's legal circles, did little to ease their concerns. The Kingstons have hired Philippa Grant, Winters explained grimly. She specializes in grandparents' rights cases and has an impressive success rate. But they have no case, Sarah protested, her voice rising in frustration. Ethan is thriving. Anyone can see that. Winters regarded her thoughtfully, a hint of sympathy in his shrewd eyes. Unfortunately, Miss Hayes, your presence complicates matters. The court may view your relationship with Mr. Blackwood as evidence of instability, especially given how quickly it developed after your employment. We're not even, Sarah began, then stopped, unsure how to define what they were becoming. The appearance is what matters, Winters continued, his voice devoid of emotion. A widower employing a pregnant nanny who soon after moves into the main house. It raises questions about judgment, about morality. James's jaw tightened, a muscle throbbing in his cheek. Sarah and Luna are family now. I won't pretend otherwise. I understand, Winters sighed, a flicker of weariness in his eyes. But this fight will get ugly. The Kingstons will exploit every vulnerability. Are you prepared for that? After the lawyer left, a heavy silence fell between them. Sarah busied herself preparing a quiet dinner, while James retreated to his study, the door uncharacteristically closed. When she checked on him hours later, she found him surrounded by papers. Eleanor's journal spread across his desk, a half-empty glass of scotch nearby. Did you know? He asked without looking up, his voice hollow, strained. Know what? Sarah asked, a growing sense of dread. That Eleanor had a heart condition, that her parents knew pregnancy could kill her, and they never told us. Sarah stepped closer, alarmed by the raw anguish in his expression. What are you talking about? James held up one of the journals, his hand trembling. It's all here. Eleanor discovered during a checkup that she had a congenital heart defect that made pregnancy high risk. She told her parents before telling me, and they convinced her to keep it secret. His voice broke, a raw sob escaping his lips. They convinced their own daughter to risk her life, rather than consider alternatives, rather than consider adoption, rather than... Tell me. Oh, James, Sarah whispered, the magnitude of this betrayal, this devastating secret, overwhelming her. She was going to tell me after that last appointment, James continued, anguish evident in every word, every ragged breath. But she never got the chance, and her parents, who now want to take my son. They knew and did nothing. Sarah reached for his hand, feeling it tremble beneath her touch. This changes things. Legally, it doesn't matter, James said dully, his voice flat, defeated. Nothing matters if they take Ethan. They won't, Sarah insisted, her voice firm, resolute. We'll fight them. together. But in the days that followed, James withdrew further. He went through the motions of family life, reading to Ethan, helping with Luna, attending conference calls. But the light had gone out of him. The custody suit had reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal, deeper, more painful than before. The Kingstons' first court-mandated visitation, a tense, controlled affair, left Ethan confused and James seething. They showed him photos of Eleanor, told him she was his real mommy, James reported afterward, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. As if we've ever suggested otherwise, Sarah felt a sharp stab of pain. What did Ethan say? He asked if his real mommy was coming to take him away. James's voice was tight with controlled fury. He was frightened, Sarah. His own grandparents frightened him. That night, after checking that both children were asleep, Sarah made a decision. She found Eleanor's journals where James had returned them to the office safe, the combination now shared between them. Reading through the final, heart-wrenching entries again, a plan, daring and desperate, began to form in her mind. The next morning, she asked Mrs. Davies to watch the children. "Where are you going?" James asked, noticing her dressy attire, his voice laced with concern. "To fix this," Sarah replied simply, her gaze steady, resolute. "Trust me." The Kingstons' sprawling mansion in the exclusive Knightsbridge neighborhood made the Blackwood estate look modest by comparison. Sarah squared her shoulders, taking a deep breath, before ringing the bell, Eleanor's final, poignant journal clutched in her purse. Lady Kingston's expression upon opening the door shifted from confusion to cold disdain. "Miss Hayes, this is highly inappropriate." 5 minutes, Sarah requested, her voice calm, unwavering. "That's all I ask." Curiosity, it seemed, outweighed hostility, as Lady Kingston reluctantly stepped aside, ushering Sarah into a formal sitting room where Lord Kingston sat reading financial reports. "What could you possibly have to say that our lawyers shouldn't handle?" Lady Kingston asked coldly, her eyes narrowed. Sarah calmly removed Eleanor's journal from her purse. "Your daughter had a voice. I think it's time you listened to it." Lady Kingston paled, her carefully composed face faltering. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor kept journals. This was her last one. Sarah opened to a marked page, her finger tracing Eleanor's familiar handwriting. "She wrote this 3 days before she died. Mum and Dad still insist we keep my condition secret from James. They say the stress will only make things worse. But he deserves to know the risks. After tomorrow's appointment, I'm telling him everything about my heart, about the pregnancy dangers the specialist mentioned. If something happens to me, I don't want James to blame himself." Lord Kingston stood abruptly, his face ashen. "You have no right." "I'm not finished," Sarah continued calmly, her gaze unwavering as she met their shocked eyes. Eleanor also wrote, "If anything happens, I hope James finds happiness again. Ethan deserves a mother's love, even if I can't be the one to give it." Silence filled the room, thick with unspoken guilt and profound regret. Lady Kingston's carefully composed face crumpled, age and raw grief suddenly evident in every line, every etched worry. "Your daughter wanted James to find happiness," Sarah said gently, her voice soft but firm. "Would she want this lawsuit? This cruel attempt to punish him for doing exactly what she hoped he would do?" "You don't understand," Lady Kingston whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Eleanor was everything to us. And Ethan is everything to James," Sarah replied, her voice resonating with deep conviction. "He's not replacing Eleanor. No one could. He's honoring her by ensuring her son grows up loved and secure, surrounded by joy." Lord Kingston moved to his wife's side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We blame James," he admitted heavily, his voice rough with pain, "for encouraging the pregnancy when we knew the risks. And he blames himself," Sarah told them, her voice full of empathy, "every single day, even though he didn't know. The truth is painful, but necessary, isn't it? We just want to be part of Ethan's life," Lady Kingston said finally, her voice thick with tears. Then be grandparents, not adversaries, Sarah suggested, her voice softening. There's room for you without a custody battle. There's room for all of us, if you choose love over bitterness. When Sarah returned home, she found James waiting anxiously, pacing the drawing room. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice tight with worry. I was worried sick. Instead of answering, Sarah handed him a folded document. The Kingston's lawyer will confirm, but they're withdrawing the lawsuit. They'd like to arrange regular visitation instead. James stared at her in disbelief, his eyes wide, then narrowed slightly. How did you? I showed them Eleanor's words, Sarah explained, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. Sometimes people just need reminding of what truly matters. That evening, after the children were asleep, James led Sarah to the garden where they had shared their first unexpected kiss. Under a sky scattered with a million twinkling stars, he knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. James, what are you doing? Sarah gasped, her heart leaping. Something I should have done weeks ago, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah Hayes, you walked into our broken lives and made them whole again. You showed us how to truly live. Will you marry me? Be Ethan's mother officially. Let me be Luna's father. Make this family real in every way. Sarah's heart soared, a burst of pure joy, but caution tempered her elation. Is this because of the lawsuit? Because it's withdrawn now, we don't need to. This has nothing to do with the Kingstons, James interrupted fiercely, his eyes blazing with sincerity. This is about us. You, me, Ethan, Luna. The family we've already become, despite everything. Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed insistently. Apologizing, she checked the screen, then froze. It's Liam, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's filing for paternity rights to Luna. The following weeks became a painful blur of legal meetings. Liam, apparently having learned of James's wealth, was now demanding not only visitation rights, but significant financial support for Luna. He's lying, Sarah insisted to their attorney, Arthur Winters, her voice trembling with indignation. He wanted nothing to do with Luna before. He abandoned us. Unfortunately, Miss Hayes, without a paternity test, his claim has to be addressed, Winters explained, his voice gentle but firm. James never wavered. We'll fight this too, he promised Sarah, his hand finding hers. Together. The court-ordered DNA test results arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Sarah's hands trembled as James opened the envelope. Liam is not Luna's biological father, he read, looking up in confusion. A profound shock on his face. Probability of paternity 0%. Sarah sank into a chair, shock and long-forgotten, painful memories washing over her. There was someone else, she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. After Liam left the first time, before he came back briefly, I was heartbroken. I made a mistake at a friend's party. It was just once, and when Liam returned weeks later claiming he'd changed, I convinced myself the baby had to be his. I never even considered. She looked up at James, fear clouding her features, expecting judgment, rejection. James set the results aside and knelt before her, his gaze unwavering, full of compassion. Sarah, look at me. She met his eyes reluctantly, bracing herself. We all have pasts, he said gently, his voice soft, understanding. We all make choices we later question. Luna is still the child I've come to love, regardless of who contributed to her DNA. She's my daughter. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, tears of relief, of profound gratitude. How can you be so understanding? Because I love you, James said simply, his voice rich with emotion. All of you, your strength, your compassion, and yes, your mistakes too. They're part of what made you the woman who saved us, Sarah. Sarah touched his face wonderingly, a profound sense of peace settling over her. I love you too, James. I think I have since that night you promised not to leave me at the hospital. Is that a yes to my proposal then? James asked with a hopeful smile, a glimmer of his old charm returning. Yes, Sarah answered, pulling him closer, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Were you surprised by the paternity test results? How do you think this will change Sarah and James's future? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of love, loss, and resilience. The Circle of Love. Their wedding took place in the Blackwood Estate garden 3 months later, a small, intimate ceremony under a canopy of blooming wisteria. Mrs. Davies beamed proudly from the front row, wiping away a tear. The Kingstons watched with cautious, yet now genuine, approval. Even Carla, Sarah's mother, dabbed at unexpected tears, a rare softening in her usually stern demeanor. James held Luna, now a thriving, gurgling infant, while Sarah carried a beaming Ethan as they exchanged vows, promising to honor the past while bravely building their future together. I never thought I'd find love twice in one lifetime, James said in his heartfelt vows, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't replace what I lost, Sarah. You showed me how to create something new from broken pieces. You showed me how to live again. You gave me and Luna a home when we had nowhere to go, Sarah replied, tears of joy streaming down her face. But more importantly, you gave us a family, something I never truly had before. As they sealed their promises with a tender kiss, Ethan wiggled excitedly in Sarah's arms, reaching for James, while Luna gurgled happily against her father's chest. Family kiss, Ethan demanded, making the assembled guests laugh warmly. James and Sarah obliged, drawing both children into their embrace, a perfect circle of love made stronger by the very breaks that had once defined them. 5 years had transformed the Blackwood Estate. What had once been formal, sprawling gardens now featured a vibrant wooden swing set, a sandbox overflowing with toys, and colorful play equipment that Mrs. Davies no longer bothered trying to contain. The guest house, once a temporary refuge, had been lovingly converted into Sarah's dream project, a thriving support center for single mothers, where she worked 3 days a week, putting her completed nursing degree to practical, compassionate use. Mama, look how high! 7-year-old Ethan called from the swing, his legs pumping vigorously, his face alight with joy. I see you, my brave boy, Sarah called back, shifting 3-year-old Thomas, their youngest, to her other hip. Thomas had James's serious expressions but Sarah's unquenchable curiosity. Luna, now 5, sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket, carefully arranging wildflowers for her birthday crown. Her dark curls caught the afternoon sunlight as she concentrated on her work with the same quiet intensity James brought to his business meetings. Need help, princess? James asked, settling beside his daughter, a loving smile on his face. Luna solemnly handed him a daisy. This one goes next, Daddy. Sarah watched them together, her heart full to bursting. 5 years had eased the sharp edges of grief that had once defined this family. Eleanor's cherished photos now hung gracefully alongside new family portraits in the main hallway, past and present coexisting peacefully, neither diminishing the other. The Kingstons would arrive soon for Luna's birthday celebration, bringing their customary extravagant gifts but also genuine affection. Their monthly visits had evolved from tense, obligatory affairs to welcome traditions, particularly since Thomas's birth had given them another precious grandchild to adore. Even Carla, Sarah's mother, had softened, especially after Sarah and James had paid off her mortgage as a Christmas surprise 2 years ago. Maybe you chose correctly after all, she had grudgingly admitted to Sarah, which, from Carla, was practically a full blessing. Penny for your thoughts? James asked, approaching with Luna now proudly wearing her completed flower crown. Just counting blessings, Sarah replied, leaning into his warm embrace, a deep contentment settling over her. Later, after the birthday cake had been joyfully demolished and presents unwrapped with appropriate excitement, Sarah found Ethan in the study, poring over old photo albums. What are you looking at, sweetheart? She asked, sitting beside him on the large sofa. The story pictures, Ethan replied, his finger tracing an image. The ones from before. Sarah recognized the album. It contained photos from her early days at the estate, including some Mrs. Davies had taken without their knowledge. Sarah reading to Ethan in the garden, James watching them from his office window, the four of them at Luna's first Christmas. Grandpa Kingston told me there was a story, Ethan continued, his brow furrowed in concentration, about how you came to help with me when I was little, and how Dad did something unexpected. Sarah smiled, remembering the long, winding journey that had brought them here. He did many unexpected things, didn't he? But what was the unexpected thing, Sarah? Ethan pressed, his eyes wide with curiosity. The one everyone talks about? James appeared in the doorway, Thomas now asleep against his shoulder, his gentle snores audible. What's this about unexpected things? Ethan's asking about our story, Sarah explained, a loving smile on her face. James joined them on the sofa, carefully transferring Thomas to his lap. Which part? The beginning, Sarah said, turning the album pages to a particular photo. James holding newborn Luna in the hospital, his expression transformed from a grief-stricken widower to summit. Hing knew something profoundly hopeful. When you asked me to stay, was that the unexpected thing, Daddy? Ethan asked, looking up at James. James and Sarah exchanged meaningful glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Part of it, James answered thoughtfully, his gaze resting on Sarah. But the truly unexpected thing was bigger than any single moment, my boy. What then? Luna asked, climbing onto the sofa to join the conversation, her eyes bright with anticipation. Sarah brushed a tender hand over her daughter's flower crown. He opened his heart, she explained simply, her voice filled with love, and created a family from broken pieces. Were we broken? Ethan frowned, not understanding the adult words. Not you, son, James assured him, pulling Ethan closer. But sometimes adults get hurt inside where you can't see the injuries. Your first mom's death hurt me so deeply, I thought I'd never be whole again. And my heart was hurt by people who should have cared for me, Sarah added softly, her gaze meeting James's. We were both afraid to trust, to love again. But you fixed each other, Luna stated with a child's perfect clarity and unwavering conviction. We did, James agreed, reaching for Sarah's hand, intertwining their fingers. Together with you and your brothers, we created something stronger than before. Sarah thought about the circuitous path that had led them here. From a desperate, pregnant nanny to a beloved wife and mother. From a grief-paralyzed widower to the laughing father who now coached Ethan's local football team and patiently built endless block towers with Thomas. The journey hadn't been without its challenges. James had faced whispers and criticism for replacing Eleanor so quickly, while Sarah had weathered prejudice about her background and perceived motivations. Luna occasionally asked difficult questions about her biological father, questions they answered with age-appropriate honesty, promising more details when she was older. But they had faced each hurdle together, their commitment to honesty with each other, and the children creating a foundation stronger than any fairy tale romance. Grandma Kingston is here, Luna announced excitedly, spotting the Kingstons' car through the window. She raced outside, Ethan following close behind, eager to greet their grandparents. Should I wait, Thomas? James asked, still holding their youngest, who was now stirring. Let him sleep, Sarah replied, a knowing smile on her face. Your mother-in-law will just enjoy the chance to hold him. James smiled at Sarah's casual, affectionate reference to Lady Kingston as her mother-in-law. You've won her over completely, you know. Last month, she actually called me to compliment your handling of Ethan's school situation. Miracles never cease, Sarah laughed, shaking her head in amusement. As James carried Thomas to greet their guests, Sarah lingered a moment longer with the photo albums. She found her favorite image, taken at their wedding, the four of them illuminated by golden sunset light. James holding Luna while Sarah carried Ethan, all of them laughing, utterly joyous, at something now forgotten. Beside it, she had carefully placed a beautiful photo of Eleanor with James, a gentle reminder that love didn't have to be erased to make room for new chapters. It could simply expand, becoming richer, more complex. Sarah, James called from the garden, his voice warm, inviting. The kids want to show the Kingstons their new treehouse. Coming, she replied, closing the album gently, a sense of deep gratitude settling over her. Outside, she paused, taking in the vibrant scene. James deep in conversation with Lord Kingston. Thomas now awake and toddling toward her. Luna proudly showing Lady Kingston her completed flower crown. Ethan demonstrating his climbing skills for anyone who would watch. 5 years ago, Sarah had been pregnant and alone, taking a job out of sheer desperation. James had been existing rather than living, going through the motions without purpose, surrounded by ghosts. Now they stood at the very center of a noisy, messy, perfectly imperfect family. Vibrant proof that sometimes the most unexpected turns in life led precisely where you were meant to be. As Thomas reached her with a triumphant giggle, Sarah swept him into her arms and joined her family in the sunshine, the circle of their journey now beautifully complete. This story is a testament to the fact that love can bloom even in the most unexpected circumstances, turning loss into new beginnings. If Sarah and James's journey resonated with you, please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the Soul Stirring Stories channel. Your support helps us share more tales of resilience, unexpected love, and the incredible power of the human heart. Because every story we tell has the power to heal, and the next one might just be yours.